There is a version of a cancer story that ends in the worst possible way. We have covered many of those on this channel. But there is another version, the one where the diagnosis comes, where the treatment is brutal and the outcome uncertain, and where the person on the other side of it gets to come back.
In a new interview, Michael Douglas reveals that his cancer was apparently caused by a sexually transmitted disease, his throat cancer.
These are the stories that tend to get told quietly in interviews years later, when the fear has settled into something more like gratitude. Today we look at iconic actors who fought cancer and won. Michael Douglas. In the summer of 2010, Michael Douglas was doing press for Wall Street. Money never sleeps when he mentioned, during a television appearance, that he had just finished his first week of chemotherapy and radiation for stage 4 cancer at the base of his tongue. He was 65 years old. The tumor was described as walnut-sized. Doctors put his survival rate at around 80%. Better odds than many people here at that stage, but still a figure that demands to be heard. The diagnosis had taken months to arrive. He had been experiencing soreness at the back of his mouth, treated repeatedly with antibiotics, before a cancer specialist finally performed a biopsy. The 8-week daily radiation and chemotherapy regimen that followed was, in his own description, very intense. He lost significant weight. His voice was affected. Eating became difficult. By January 2011, he appeared on the Today Show and announced that scans showed no trace of the tumor. Cancer-free. He returned to work on a schedule that would have seemed unremarkable had nobody known what had preceded it. The Liberace biopic Behind the Candelabra, the Ant-Man films, the Netflix series The Kominsky Method, for which he won a Golden Globe. He has spoken since about checking his health every 6 months, and about the conviction, which never left him during treatment, that dying was not part of his plan. Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 2003 during a routine medical checkup. He was 60 years old. His representatives confirmed that the cancer had been detected early and that treatment would follow, but De Niro characteristically offered almost nothing beyond that. He is among the most private major actors of his generation, and his approach to the diagnosis was of a piece with who he is. Handle it and say as little as possible. He underwent surgery. The procedure went well. He was back on set for Meet the Fockers the following year, beginning a stretch of steady work in the middle of the decade that showed no visible interruption. Goodfellas, Raging Bull, The Godfather. Part 2, the body of work that defined him had already been assembled. What the early detection and treatment allowed was the continuation of a career that had decades still in it. He has spoken about the diagnosis occasionally in interviews, always with the matter-of-fact brevity that characterizes everything he says in public. The most consistent thing he has communicated is that regular screenings are what made the difference, that the cancer was found before it had any room to spread precisely because he had kept his medical appointments. He has been cancer-free for more than 20 years. Kathy Bates. Kathy Bates has dealt with cancer twice, and she has spoken about both experiences with the kind of directness that feels like a deliberate decision. The first time, in 2003, she chose silence. She was filming Little Black Book while undergoing chemotherapy for stage 1 ovarian cancer, and her agent advised her against going public. She followed that advice, worked through the treatment, and did not speak about it until years later. The secrecy took a toll on her. The second time, in 2012, she had a different approach. An MRI taken because she had been feeling unwell found a tumor in her left breast. With a strong family history, her mother, aunt, and grandmother had all had breast cancer, and her aunt had died of it. She opted for a double mastectomy without significant hesitation. The surgery removed both breasts and 19 lymph nodes. The pain in the aftermath was more difficult than anything she had experienced with the ovarian cancer. And then there was a further complication: lymphedema, chronic swelling in her arms caused by the removal of lymph nodes, a condition that affects a significant portion of people who undergo breast cancer surgery, and that has no cure. She has since become one of the most visible advocates for lymphedema awareness in the country, testifying before Congress, working with the Lymphatic Education and Research Network, and speaking about it in interviews with the same unflinching precision she brings to her best screen work. She has said she feels lucky to be alive. The word luck does not cover the full picture of what she went through, but it comes from a genuine place. Hugh Jackman first had a basal cell carcinoma removed in 2013. He posted about it on Instagram afterward with a photograph of the bandage on his nose and a message: "Get checked. Wear sunscreen." That was the beginning of a recurring pattern that has now extended more than a decade. The carcinomas have come back, on the nose, near the nose, requiring biopsies and surgeries at intervals that have never quite stopped. Basal cell carcinoma is the most common and least dangerous form of skin cancer, and Jackman has been clear about that distinction. He has not dramatized the situation or suggested that he has been confronting something more threatening than it is. What he has done, consistently and visibly, is use the platform that his fame provides to say the same thing to large numbers of people. Go to the dermatologist, take the suspicious spot seriously, put on sunscreen before you go outside. His own background as an Australian who grew up with the culture of outdoor life contributes to the credibility of the message. He has had the carcinomas, treated successfully each time. The pattern of recurrence is consistent with the nature of the condition in people with his skin type and sun exposure history. He remains vigilant about monitoring and shows no sign of treating it as a reason to slow down. Between the Wolverine films, The Greatest Showman, his Broadway work in The Music Man, and the ongoing follow-up appointments that have become a fixture of his medical calendar, the two threads of his life have run together quietly and without visible disruption. It took Fran Drescher 2 years and 8 doctors to be diagnosed with uterine cancer. She had the symptoms throughout that period, staining between periods, cramping, and she presented them, repeatedly, to medical professionals who did not connect them to a cancer diagnosis. She was too young, several of them decided. Too thin, not the typical profile. She was prescribed hormone replacement therapy 4 times. Each time it made her worse. The cancer, untreated, was progressing. The 8th doctor finally ordered an endometrial biopsy. The result came back positive. It was uterine cancer, still at stage 1, curable, but found far later than it should have been. She underwent a radical hysterectomy at Cedars-Sinai in June 2000 and has been cancer-free since. She was outed by the tabloids before she had any opportunity to manage the public story herself, which she has since described as oddly liberating. It removed the option of staying quiet and opened the path to everything that came after. What came after was the book Cancer Schmancer, published in 2002, which became a New York Times bestseller. Then, in 2007, the Cancer Schmancer Foundation, dedicated to transforming patients into informed medical consumers and shifting the emphasis of women's health care toward early detection. She lobbied Congress for the passage of Johanna's Law. She served as a public diplomacy envoy for women's health under 2 presidents. She is, at this point, as much a healthcare advocate as she is an actress, and she arrived at that life through 2 years of being told she was fine when she was not. Ben Stiller was 48 years old in 2014 when a routine PSA blood test came back abnormal. He had no symptoms. He had no particular reason to be concerned. He had simply gone to his doctor for a standard checkup, and the test flagged something that warranted a follow-up. A biopsy confirmed prostate cancer. He kept the diagnosis private for 2 years, continuing to work, processing the experience largely away from public view. He went to multiple specialists. He spoke to other men who had been through the same thing, including a doctor who had treated Robert De Niro for the same condition. He chose surgery, a radical prostatectomy. By the time he disclosed the diagnosis publicly in a post on Medium in 2016, he had already been cancer-free for 2 years. The disclosure itself was largely an argument for the PSA test, which had recently been the subject of medical debate about whether it was overused and whether its results led to unnecessary procedures. His view was clear, and he stated it without ambiguity. The test found his cancer before it could spread, and that early detection was the reason he was healthy. He acknowledged the debate, but spoke from the position of someone to whom the test had, quite specifically, made the decisive difference. He was, at the time of the disclosure, the age he was, 52, father of 2 children, active in films and television, because a routine blood draw had returned an abnormal number and a doctor had followed up on it. Jeff Bridges. In October 2020, Jeff Bridges announced on social media that he had been diagnosed with lymphoma. He quoted his Big Lebowski character, the dude, at the top of the post. New stuff has come to light. And then explained that he had a serious disease, that his doctors were good, and that the prognosis was favorable. He said he would keep people posted. The tumor was 9 inches by 12 inches. It was in his abdomen. He began chemotherapy. The treatment was working. By early 2021, the mass had shrunk substantially. And then, in January, someone at the facility where he was receiving treatment was exposed to COVID-19, and Bridges contracted it. His immune system had been stripped by the chemotherapy. He had nothing to fight the virus with. He spent 5 weeks in the hospital. His wife Susan stayed by his side and, by his account, fought to keep him off a ventilator when the doctors were considering it. He came very close. He described the experience as making the cancer look like a piece of cake. He set himself a goal, walking his daughter Haley down the aisle at her wedding in July 2022. He worked with a physical therapist. He rebuilt enough strength to do it without an oxygen tank. He not only walked her down the aisle, he did the father-daughter dance. By September 2021, his lymphoma was in remission. The tumor had shrunk to the size of a marble. He continues to work, currently in the FX series The Old Man, and continues to speak about the experience with the particular quality he brings to everything. Warmth, directness, a refusal to pretend it was anything other than what it was. Christina Applegate. Christina Applegate was 36 years old in 2008 when a routine MRI found a small cancerous mass in one breast. She was not expecting it. She had gone in for an unrelated scan. The discovery sent her down a path of genetic testing that revealed she carried the BRCA1 gene mutation, a significantly elevated hereditary risk for both breast and ovarian cancer that ran in her family. Given that information, She made a decision that went beyond treating what had been found. She chose a double mastectomy, removing both breasts even though only one had the detected tumor, as a preventive measure against future cancer in the other breast. She also later had her ovaries and fallopian tubes removed. These were aggressive choices, made in full knowledge of what they meant, by someone who wanted to control what risk she could. She has spoken about the process as difficult and as right, not the only right choice, but right for her. She returned to television and resumed a career that was already strong and has since become one of the most respected performances of her generation. She has been cancer-free since 2008. She founded the Right Action Foundation to help women access imaging and genetic testing regardless of financial means. She has said that the double mastectomy was the hardest thing she has done, and that she would do it again. She was 36. She made a decision, and then she kept working. Kylie Minogue. Kylie Minogue was 36 years old and in the middle of preparing for a world tour when she was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2005. The diagnosis came after an initial test had missed the cancer entirely. She had received a clear result from one examination before a second opinion caught what the first had not. The fact that she pushed for that second opinion is something she has spoken about in the years since, as the decision that changed the course of what happened next. She canceled the Showgirl tour, the most ambitious production of her career to that point. She underwent surgery followed by chemotherapy in Australia. The treatment was grueling, and the visibility was enormous. She was one of the most famous people in Australia, and one of the most recognizable entertainers in the world. And her diagnosis was front-page news across multiple countries. She managed the process with a degree of privacy that required real effort, and emerged from it determined to get back to the work she had canceled. She returned to the stage in 2006 for the Homecoming tour. The rescheduled Showgirl shows reframed as a celebration of survival, and has since released multiple albums, headlined major festivals, and been appointed a Commander of the Order of the British Empire. She has spoken consistently about the importance of second opinions, of pushing back when an initial result doesn't match what you feel, of not accepting a clear result as the only possible answer. The first test said she was fine. The second test saved her life. Rita Wilson. Rita Wilson was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2015 after a process that required pushing past an initial reassurance. A biopsy had returned a result of lobular carcinoma in situ, a condition indicating elevated risk, but not, in that reading, active cancer requiring immediate surgical intervention. She was not satisfied with that result. She sought a second opinion and asked for a different pathologist to review the same tissue samples. The second review identified invasive lobular carcinoma. Cancer was present and had been missed in the first reading. She underwent a double mastectomy and reconstructive surgery. She was 58 years old. Her husband, Tom Hanks, was with her throughout. She disclosed the diagnosis herself publicly in People magazine, framing it in part as an argument for exactly what had made the difference in her own case: the willingness to demand a second look, to ask a different doctor to review the same evidence, to treat a reassurance that doesn't match your instincts as something to question rather than accept. She has been cancer-free since 2015. The acting work continued. The advocacy work expanded. She has spoken at conferences, participated in awareness campaigns, and returned repeatedly to the specific and narrow message that her own experience taught her. That the same tissue can yield different readings. That second opinions are not an insult to a doctor, but a standard tool of self-protection. And that the outcome of her own case turned on whether she trusted the first answer she was given. "10 stories, 10 people who are still here." The circumstances varied enormously. What was found, how late, how aggressively it was treated, what side effects and complications followed. But there is something consistent across these accounts that is worth naming. In almost every case, either early detection made the decisive difference, or a refusal to accept an incomplete answer did. Robert De Niro's routine checkup, Ben Stiller's PSA test, Rita Wilson's demand for a second pathologist, Fran Drescher's 8 doctors, and her refusal to stop at 7. Cancer is not a story with a formula. But the people on this list who survived it, almost uniformly, are here because someone, a doctor or they themselves, looked more carefully or earlier than might otherwise have happened. That is not a comfortable message to package neatly. It is simply what these 10 accounts, taken together, seem to say. If any of these stories resonated with you, or brought someone to mind, we would be glad to hear about it in the comments. Subscribing is the best way to stay with us as we continue exploring the lives behind the names we know.